Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and I am so excited to be celebrating 10 years of meaningful conversations with you. As we step into our new primetime hour, it's such an honor to share this exciting new chapter with you. So, whether you're starting your day out, headed to work, or listening from wherever you are, this hour is designed to bring you thoughtful dialogue, fresh insight, and inspiring stories so you can make every moment count. So, thank you for being here with me today, and let's dive in. We're here today with special guest Ken Young, who's here to share with us his new novel series, The King's Frog Hunter. Can courage, loyalty, and honor overcome the darkness threatening an entire kingdom? Well, today's guest is here to share with us just that. Ken Young is a best-selling fantasy adventure author. He studied literature in college, and although he earned his living as a building contractor, including serving as a construction manager for Habitat for Humanity, writing has always been his lifelong passion. So welcome to the show, Ken Young.
Well, thank you, Marianne, for having me on the show.
My goodness, well, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this series. But let's start with this first book. I mean, what inspired you to write this story?
Well, that's going back to the very beginning, isn't it? The genesis of the King's Frog Hunter started when our daughter was about, I guess, 5 or 6 years old. And my wife and I were wondering how we were going to educate this beautiful child. One of the many things we discussed was how to teach her the values and virtues that we wanted to instill in her without being too heavy-handed about it. And at that time, we had gotten into a bad habit of watching TV every night until going to bed. And to resolve that waste of time issue, my amazing wife strongly suggested one day that we just remove the TV and spend the time in the evenings reading stories with our daughter. So I, of course, agreed to that. And for about the next 5 or 6 years, we uh, removed the TV from our home and home environment. And at night, we started reading different stories and books and then discussing them and analyzing with her the decisions that the characters made, the good and bad, and results of those decisions. Um, and we wanted her to grow up with a, a real depth of understanding of mysteries, the imagination, to develop her imagination as well. And so we were choosing stories and books like The Mysteries of Sherlock Holmes, by Arthur Conan Doyle, Mark Twain's stories, The Call of the Wild by Jack London. Then we got into The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, of course. And as our daughter grew, she started expanding. She started expanding our reading list by suggesting books that she was being introduced to by the school librarian. Books that I probably would never have picked up to read and didn't know about at the time. For example, like the Narnia Chronicles by C.S. Lewis or Anne of Green Gables by, I think, Lucy Maud Montgomery wrote those. So we used great literature to teach reasoning and values instead of it just coming from mom and dad. We used the books. The books actually became like tools in our parental toolbox, so to speak. And along this time, I wanted to start writing uh, some fun fantasy adventure story for her. And so I started writing this whimsical, fun story for her about a father who is a sculptor of stone truth and his young daughter in a troubled ancient world with giant man-eating frogs and a mysterious, fearless hunter who has animal companions, a wild paint stallion, a giant shell creature, and a great horned owl. The father and daughter are swept up in the intrigue of an ancient prophecy in this kingdom, and we learned that the daughter, Mashina is her name, that she is an intricate part of it and essential for saving the kingdom from the evil forces trying to take over. So that started the journey. And I tried to write into the characters the values that we wanted our daughter to learn and embrace. Things like courage, perseverance, responsibility, honesty, and loyalty. The King's Frog Hunter really started as a children's book, children's story. And because of our daughter's age, of course, that's how it got going. Thus the fairy tale and the mythical like animals and characters that I was creating. Um, but as she grew, and over time, the characters developed. So did the writing and the depth of the story to express the power of more of a family and friendship, humility, being a servant leader, and forgiveness, to name a few of the virtues. So, speeding up the calendar here, and many years later, when my daughter received her law degree, she requested as a graduation gift that I finish the story of the King's Frog Hunter and publish it for her. So I had to go back and work on finishing the story with a satisfying and giving it a happy ending, then editing and rewriting those years of work into a novel. Um, so The King's Frog Hunter, which is the original title from her childhood, took many years to mature on the page and then be transformed into a book. After it was published, I thought, well, King's Frog Hunter is a one and done book, and I'm finished with that. However, my characters weren't done talking, and they had a lot more to say. And many of my readers complained that they wanted more. So I would get comments like, "Oh, you can't stop now. You've created this whole world and these characters, and we want to know what happens next." Okay, so I picked up where book one left off and wrote the second book, which is The Shadows of War. But that book did not complete the story and the prophecy. In fact, it ended with Booble, the great horned owl, flying away with a message that was crucial to the completion of the characters and the kingdom's salvation. So, to the joy of my clamoring characters that were still bugging me and readers, I wrote the third book, The Burning Battle, to complete the trilogy. Now, I got to tell you, Marianne, through these three books, writing this over the years, I have learned that if you are truly faithful to the story and to the characters, that plot lines and character arcs can take much longer to be completed than I had ever imagined. But I'm very happy with the way it turned out. And according to the reviews, I guess the readers are too. They're happy with the trilogy and but once again I'm beginning to get the question, well, when's the next one coming out?
I bet you have people clamoring for that. My goodness. So,
Yeah. Well, and here's the really fun part is and unexpected to me and joyful is that all three books now have become international bestsellers on Amazon. So that's incredible and a real inspiration for me to maybe write that next book.
oh my goodness. Well, congratulations. What an accomplishment.
Yeah, I was surprised and like I said, really thankful for that. Um, so now I'm on to possibly, like I said, another book in this series. Even though the trilogy wraps up the story really well, I think of what I had originally started when she was a child.
So, how does this story teach character building values?
Ah, that's a good question. Well, in the story, um, as I tried to write that um, into the characters, because I tried to make it. I mean, this is a fantasy adventure genre, obviously, and instead of putting a lot of magic into it and fantastical dragons and creatures, there are strange and wild creatures in it, but more more like animals that exist in our world today, with a little variation in fantasy to those. But I tried to write the characters more on a human level, and the story on a human personal level of what's going on with relationships throughout the story. So, but I tried to build the characters whose virtues never waver um, when they are tested. In fact, the testing makes them stronger. Thalmus, the king's frog hunter, is challenged constantly, but he takes each challenge calmly, steadfastly, and confident that he will prevail. But the key is that he also learns from each incident or from each mistake. Humility really does matter, and patience matters. Overconfidence or arrogance obviously can cloud your judgment and cause you to make bad decisions. So that is one aspect. And Thomas, then, he is this timeless character who has been around longer than anybody can remember, and a mysterious character with his animal companions. But he is also a servant warrior and a educator. Um, and at the beginning of the book, book one, The King's Frog Hunter, Bashina, the stonecutter's daughter, she's also known as, she appears at Thomas's home and requests his help to find her father, who has escaped from the prison at the castle. And Thomas is surprised when he realizes who she is. And he has a flashback as to a promise that he made to her father many, many years before. And as he remembers that, and this is a quote from the book, he thinks a decision once made is a commitment. The words stabbed at his heart. But long, but how long do commitments last? He wondered. He knew the answer to that question and would not ask again, for he had agreed long ago to accept this call. So here the lesson is about keeping your commitments, your promises. It's about loyalty and being dependable. Throughout the story, there are many difficult decisions that are decided based on loyalty and sacrifice of one's own safety for the good of the order or for the good of the good of the other. And they can go on and talk about discipline and endurance and perseverance in all of this. Um, there is another section from the book I would like to quote that. So at one point, Bashina has to meet, because the king requested, has to meet before she goes on the journey searching for her father with Thomas. She has to meet the magician Metro to see if he has any helpful suggestions for them on their journey. And she is afraid of him. She doesn't want to meet with him at all. But Thomas tells her, "This journey is yours. Therefore, you must be prepared to face whatever it brings before you. I can help, but you are the one who must be strong. You are the one who must endure. You must rise above that fear, for this is only the beginning." And Bashina goes on to struggle, but to persevere physically and emotionally through many battles and challenges. But he helps her along. He lets her gets knocked down and get bruised a few times, but he is constantly there with her, helping her to persevere physically and emotionally through the many battles and challenges. So there's hopefully a few examples to answer that question.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I mean, how did your imagination begin to really shape this kingdom that you've built over time?
Oh, well, I've always been a dreamer have a quite an imagination myself, and uh, I think everything that I've ever read, seen, and heard is stuck in my brain. And so when I started writing this fun story that I wanted it to be for her, and teaching the values along with it, um, that I guess just this I let I'm a discovery writer, and I know you know what that is. It's a person I sit down. I don't plot out my stories or outline them at all. I have the characters I create, and I put them in a scene or a situation that I want them to work through, and then I let them run, and I type. I follow where they go. Right? I let the characters lead me, and in many cases, that could not be a good thing. They could lead me in a direction I didn't want to go, and then I have to do some rewriting to bring them back online. But also, it will take when I let the characters go like that. It things come up out of my head that I had never imagined before, and the characters go places that I had not planned on, and in many times it is wonderful, and that's part of the joy of I think writing fantasy adventure because um, you're you can make up things, you can make up just about anything, and then try to make that work realistically anyway in a storyline and a plot with characters and keeping the character arcs going at the same time. It's a good balance. I enjoy it.
Would you say that this story is a classic good against evil adventure?
Oh yeah, it definitely is. Um, yeah, at its core, I guess you could say it is a quest story, a coming of age story. But more than that, really, it's about discovering who we are and what our purpose is, and no matter what age we are, whether we're young or whether we're old in it. And I try to wrap that into a fun, entertaining story. You know, it is a story about fighting evil. It is about the strength that comes from friendship and the courage to face the unknown and the willingness to sacrifice for what is right. The characters fight not only for their kingdom, but for the very truth of who they are. You know, the battles are not just fought on fields of war, but are within the hearts of the characters who must carry the weight of their choices. The struggle against evil is not just about defeating an external enemy, but about discovering who we are and what we're willing to fight for. I guess you could say the battles that we fight or we choose not to fight define who we are and who we might become.
There's a lot to be uncovered there. My goodness. Hey, what
Yeah,
what challenges did you face in balancing action and world building and character development throughout the story?
that is a good balance to maintain the action and then the quiet moments, the heartfelt moments, um, and the action. You know, one of the things I've over the years I had become kind of American Civil War buff on the history of our Civil War and the battles, the different battles that were fought, and I actually used some of that knowledge and that I had learned about in these books, the battle strategies that happened in the book, and then the moments of decision making. How are we going to face this enemy that has us outnumbered 5 to 1? You know, and that's part of the the characters understanding their situations and making decisions, the best decisions they can make at the moment for the way forward, right? Um, yeah, but it is, and I also I like to place the reader as much as I can in the scenes, in the story, where they feel like they're there. They feel like they're alongside the characters, experiencing what the characters are experiencing, learning what they're learning. Um, it's always interesting when I get comments from people saying that they were just exhausted after the battle at the North Ford, reading that, or they woke up the other night uh, thinking they heard the snorting of a chorgen, which is a wild animal and a creature that hunts, is a nocturnal animal that hunts at night and is trained to hunt to actually to go after our protagonist, to try to kill our protagonist in the story. So that's part of the evil and the evil characters that are training these animals to do that. So yeah, that really is satisfying to me when I readers relate to me that maybe perhaps they cried when Captain Ritzes died in one scene, that sort of thing. I also, writing, even though it's fiction, uh, sometimes I create characters that I feel really bad about that they have to die in the story, in the plot. This person needs to die, and I really like their backstory. I create backstories for all of my characters, even the minor ones. And um, I had a particular character named Tho, who was one of the the queens or the princess, one of her warriors that fought with her, and um, she is given a mission to ride back to the castle, bringing a message that they need more troops at the North Ford. They need more of the army moved there. Well, she's stopped on her way there and tortured. Not none of my torture or battles are written in a bloody way at all. I try to keep that light. And but anyway, she had to die, and in the book, and it's to because I wanted to express for the princess Ikela and the stonecutter's daughter Bashina what about grief, how they deal with grief, about losing someone they care about, and so when I had to kill her, I felt complicit in her death actually, and uh, and it was sad for me to do that. And I had a couple other characters similar like that that had to go, and it was I didn't like losing them. They were good characters.
Why does this story resonate so much with today's world?
I think that in today's world, well, I think it's because getting back to evil again, because we're constantly fighting that and dealing with that, and how evil can manifest itself in us in our worst ambitions, and and desiring wealth or desire for power, celebrity, jealousy, selfishness, and paranoia even. The story shows, I think, what happens to a society when people fall into the darkness of these traps, which I think is possibly the state of our world today. You could argue about that, but so the battle really is to preserve the values of respect, dignity, honesty, and graciousness, and the rule of law, which is really important, which the characters in this book represent and continue to fight for. In today's world, truth is touted more as my truth or individual truth, people's individual truths, and the real truth is obscured by all of that array and all those choices of individual truth. So I think uh, the story talks about that and relates to that uh, in many ways.
Can you share with us some of the joys and frustrations of writing fantasy adventure?
Oh, yes. Well, I talked a little bit about that with my character Tho, about having to kill characters that I really like, and that's frustrating to create a character that is at a moment important to the story, and part of her or his importance is to suffer or to die or to be eliminated in some way. That's part of the frustrations. Another example would be in the first book, King's Frog Hunter. There's a realm and part of the kingdom that is known as Rainland, and Thalamus and Bashina have to go in there along with Thalamus's giant shell creature Thunder, and they have to go in there. They're driven in there actually to find out what's going on and where the source of the evil might be, and and they it was fun to write. The Rainland is a place where it rains all the time and it's cold, and it's has very dim light during the day because it's overcast and raining, and at night it's total darkness. And there's about a foot of water on the ground because it's constantly raining, and there are giant worms there that are ready to entangle you. And uh, but in that realm, I wrote and discovered some great characters, good and bad ones, and I got into writing that, got them in there, and was trying to resolve that, and then get them out of there. I had a heck of a time getting them out of Rainland. the bad characters in Rainland were hanging on to me like they were hanging on to the people that lived in Rainland. They wouldn't let me go. They wouldn't let me escape Rainland. And my wife and daughter were were saying, "Are you still in Rainland?" As I would read another chapter to them, they go, "You got to get them out of there. You got to get those. You got to get out of Rainland." And it took me like three more chapters to write them out, get them out of Rainland. But and here's the crazy thing: in book three, the Burning Battle, they're drawn back into Rainland again for a good purpose. But this time they're able to resolve and help the people there and satisfy and help free them from the evil that's going on in their country, in that part of the realm, in that part of the kingdom. And they come out of there in a much better way, but in a very dangerous way, in a ride down the river.
What would you like readers and our listeners to take away from this series?
Well, I think I'd like for them to take away not only enjoying a fun story, that these values and virtues are not so covert, but are in the story. Um, but I would like for them to take away an understanding, perhaps, or learn something about values that we should all be living by, and uh, and to stand up to falsehood and evil wherever we encounter it. Really, to be strong, like I said earlier, to stand up and fight for what we choose to fight for, what's important to us, and important to us in our individual lives, important to us in our families and in our communities. What is a value to stand up for, and not to fall into the falsehood that is out there in our culture constantly. So yeah, and I'd like for them to take away that uh, some of characters, uh, the characters' values, but the fun of who the characters are in the story. Um, I've had one or two parents tell me that when they read the stories to their children, little ones especially, that the children ended up running around and play acting as themselves as Thalmus the King's Frog Hunter or Bashina or Princess Akela, and that's fun when I hear that. That makes me feel like I've done a good job as a writer.
Well, that would make any writer feel just amazing hearing that kind of feedback. Where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Well, on my website, which is www.kings thekingsfroghunter.com, kingsfroghunter.com. There I have all the books there. You can read the first chapter of book one there. And also one of the things I did, Marianne, in these books is when I first was writing, when I first started going through the editing process and getting it ready, I had the editor that was working with me. I had footnotes. Whenever I introduced a new character, I'd have a footnote about this character, the little backstory on him, right? And the editor said, "No, no, no, you can't have footnotes in fiction. You can't do that." And so I ended up, we put them together, the profiles of the characters, the animals, and the locations in the book. I put them in the back of the book. So there's a whole profiles in the back of the book. I also have those on the website. So you can read about how the background of the characters and how to pronounce their names on there. You can also, I don't sell the books through my website, but there are links to Amazon to be able to buy the books through Amazon. Um, Another aspect I think of the book is the animals in it. That those people that appreciate stories about animal companions and the bonds that form between humans and animals will like. I think they'd like the relationships and how I portrayed animals in the book. There are numerous horses that are skillful, powerful, and loyal friends with their humans. Thomas the King's Frog Hunter, of course, has a particular gift of nonverbal communication with his animal companions, the great horned owl and the paint stallion and the giant tortoise. And they are all devoutly loyal to one another and to the Stonecutter's daughter. But the animals in this world are not just animals, but are characters with depth and various abilities and strengths that at critical times are crucial throughout the story. They are very much a part of the story in this as well.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thanks for having me on, and let me talk about my books.
Well, thank you, Ken. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your novel series, The King's Frog Hunter. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.